Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of our 4-part series. This week, answering the question, is your training balanced? And most people are unsure of what to be doing in their training. Most people either blindly follow generalized programs they find online, or they randomly choose what they're going to be doing that day with no long-term plan or structure. And this leads to watered down results in your training and in the progress you're making. Having a balanced training program is essential to maximizing both performance and longevity when it comes to your fitness. In this 4-part series, the fourth one being here today, I'm going to be covering the 4 biggest programming imbalances seen across the hundreds of training programs that I've reviewed and help people improve upon. So if you haven't yet checked out, part 1 would be on push and pull. Part 2 was on contraction, so isometric, eccentric, and concentric contractions. Part 3 was on bilateral versus unilateral, and we're wrapping up this series today with part 4, talking about planes of movement. And I want to talk a little more about why this is so important, because most people totally neglect the different planes of movement in their training. And I'll get to that here in a minute. Here we'll talk specifically about what the 3 different planes are and how to train them. But when you look at most people's training programs, there's a huge imbalance between these. This might be where some of the most imbalances tend to take place, because people design their training programs to be hard, but they're not intelligent. The imbalance between these things becomes such a big factor when we talk not just losing from a maybe potential longevity or sustainability standpoint. Balancing out these planes of motion will definitely help with that. But there's also so many people lacking in building power output, building strength properly, because they're missing these 3 planes working together. Now, the 3 planes I want to talk about, there is the sagittal plane, which would be thought of as front to back. So this would be something like a barbell back squat. And before I get too far into this, there's going to be some overlap between planes. You're going to be working all the planes simultaneously in any kind of movement, but we're talking for simplicity terms, just from a simple standpoint of front back being something like a back squat. So you're moving up and down, you're moving more in that forward to back plane. Now, frontal plane would be something like a dumbbell side bend. So the weight's at your side, you're doing your side crunch, if you will, and doing the side bend movement is more in that side to side frontal plane. The transverse plane is rotational in nature. So this is something that we see as being more training where you're rotating around something. So a lot of sports tend to simulate this. Think a baseball swing, a golf swing. Think things like med ball throws where you're taking it and from one side throwing it against the wall. These rotational plane type exercises are really good for sports specific stuff, but people don't realize that these are really good for general life strengthening. This is good for a general well-balanced program. And these are extremely important to make sure that you're maximizing your performance in other areas, because if you're missing rotational plane power control, then your results in the sagittal plane, the straight forward back plane, will suffer. I see this with runners all the time. I see runners that their running sport is mostly forward back, and their training all reflects that. They're only doing squats, lunges, deadlifts, a lot of forward back type things. But what people don't realize is that the control for something like running, there's so much frontal plane stability that's needed. So there's so much control of being able to resist side to side forces. That's where a lot of knee and lower leg injuries in runners come from, is a poor control from the frontal plane and the rotational plane at their hip and at their core. Take any athlete that you can think of, and the proper athletes train in the rotational plane. And I think our training should match some of that too. And this doesn't just relate to it having to look like a sport. There are more subtle ways to train this that don't have to be super sport specific, but still hold a lot of the same value. I'm going to highlight one of my coaching clients, Trent, who I've been working with for well over 6 months at this point, maybe closer to probably 9 months at this point. And he originally came with some shoulder issues, and looking at his training, there was a big imbalance in different planes of movement. So he was doing a lot of overhead pressing, had pretty good push to pull ratios of doing a lot of back and doing a lot of shoulder work, but was still having these shoulder issues. And what was missing for him was training across different planes of movement. So not a lot of rotational stuff. He had poor rotational control at his shoulder, at his core, at his hips, and this was leading to increased stress on his shoulder. And this limited midline stability, so limited ability to do this through his core, resulted in compensations up through his shoulder, compensations down through his legs. Now, by dialing in, getting him more focused on the rotational plane, the frontal plane, and this is related to his shoulder, but also big time at his core. That's where we start with a lot of people. This cleared up all the shoulder issues. And he had tried the basic shoulder things. He had tried doing banded shoulder work. He had tried doing different mobility exercises, and none of that was working because it wasn't truly a shoulder issue as much as it was a programming issue, a lack of control and a lack of balance across those different planes. So I want to talk what you guys can keep in mind when it comes to programming out different planes in your training. In general, you're probably going to have to do more frontal and transverse plane training. This is where most people are lacking. Time and time again, you look at the ratios of sagittal or frontal or sagittal or transverse plane, and the ratios are astronomical in terms of how many people are doing sagittal plane movements versus those other ones. So make sure to check this, go through, do your own audit for it, do your own assessment of your own program, and see where those balances are. Instead of doing all sagittal plane stuff, all forward back stuff, think more things like carries of all kinds, suitcase carries at your side, front rack carries, overhead carries with different things. Do more carries. Do more things like one-arm swings, side bends, Turkish get-ups, pal-off presses, side planks, one-arm movements. These are ways that you can start to incorporate in more frontal and transverse plane training into your programming. You also want to train these isometrically as well as concentrically and eccentrically. If you didn't check out day 2 of this series, that can give you a little more insight into what that means and how to incorporate that. But make sure that the example of a carry is something that's trained isometrically. So you're not moving through that movement, where something like a side bend, you are actively moving through that position. Both are beneficial and both should be trained. Now, you also want to make sure to train this in different ways, challenge it in different ways, challenge it at different speeds. Think moving through movement. So there's the moving through movement versus the isometrics are going to challenge you in much different ways and require different levels of stability. So make sure all those things are taken into account. If that's too advanced, if you're like, whoa, that's over my head, I'm not quite following, just do more stuff in the side to side and the rotational planes, and you will get a lot of benefit from it. Now, like I said earlier, this could look like sport-specific things, or this could look much more simple than that. Now, you can change an exercise from more of a sagittal plane movement to a frontal or rotational plane movement simply by taking an exercise where you'd hold 2 weights at your side and moving that over to one side. So think something like a lunge. If you hold on to 2 dumbbells at your side and you do lunges, that's primarily, we'll call it a sagittal plane exercise. And we can argue, like I said, there's going to be multiple planes across multiple exercises, but the exercise becomes much more frontal plane and much more rotational plane if instead of holding 2 dumbbells, you just hold it off to one side. You're going to feel different muscles through your core, through your hips, having to work to stabilize you. And that is the simplest way I know to take a primary sagittal plane movement and turn it into a transverse or frontal plane movement. Something like a squat as well. Instead of doing a back squat, try doing a kettlebell front rack squat with the weight off to one side. All of a sudden that changes the exercise. And it might still primarily be a sagittal plane exercise, but you get a ton of the benefits of the rotational and the frontal plane training, which go so far into improving your core stability, improving your hip stability, improving your ability to generate power, which will allow you to do more weight, to build more strength, and to stay healthy for years to come. And to wrap this series up, guys, this is programming in your training is maybe more complex than you thought it was. You might have seen it before as simply just writing out your program for the day, following it, and then seeing how you feel tomorrow. But as you can see, there's so much that goes into this. There's so much complexity and structure that should go into this. And I would argue if you don't have that knowledge, research yourself, educate yourself. Things like this podcast gives you a good starting point. other resources that are out there that you can find to learn more about it is a great starting point. But if you're not willing to sit down and write out your program with this kind of detail, then you need to find a coach. You need to find someone that can help you do that, because programming is the thing that drives people to our PT clinic. Bad programming, that is, bad programming that does not have this balance, that does not address these things, people end up with pain and injury, and they have to come to us to help get that back under control. And there's techniques we have to do to start to jumpstart, get pain under control, get it calmed down, get their movement patterns right. But then we jump straight to, what's your program look like? What are you trying to get back to? How can we improve this so that this doesn't happen again? And I see this all the time with the Men Made for More coaching clients that I get to work with as well. They come with programs. They're like, hey, I'm not really getting the results I want. And you see their programs and they're stale. They're getting stale results. They're following general programs that don't even apply to them. So this becomes extremely important for getting the results you want in the short term and maintaining those results for the long term. Imagine instead having a well-rounded, balanced, and effective program that's specific to you and your individual needs. Imagine making progress like never before, progress you're after inside and outside the gym, and doing that for decades to come. All that's possible with a challenging but intelligent program. And guys, I hope you found this series helpful. These programs are what I designed for all of our coaching clients. This is what we do. And if you guys are looking for help, if you're interested in having me look over your program, head on over to the link in the show notes to sign up for a free training program audit. Something I'm offering for you guys. You can only take on a few of these a week. So go ahead and make sure to head to that link and get signed up. And I'll let you know where your program can use improvement to help you reach your training goals. If you're looking for more specific advice on it, head to that same link. If you're looking for more of a structured way to get help, I'd love to help you out. So this is something I've seen hundreds of clients get transformed results from addressing a proper training program. And it's possible for you too. If you're interested in talking, go ahead and head to that link and let's set up a time to talk through your program. So thanks for listening today, guys. Thanks for finishing up all 4 parts of this. If you haven't, make sure to go watch the first 3 parts. And as always, guys, reach out if you guys need anything. Take me up, head on over to that link to set up a call. Let's talk through your program and let's get you dialed in. Thanks for listening today, guys. I will talk to you soon.